Cops and other law enforcement officers, tell us about cases where you thought something supernatural paranormal was going on. I'm a former emergency worker, a firefighter. One night a call came in to check on the health of a man who called in at 911, who, however, did not answer the operator. We arrived at the address. The house was somehow strange, and on the doorstep we were met and greeted by a little old lady. We asked her if she knew who had called at 911, but she said she had been living alone since her husband died. We had barely made it back to the station when another call came in, still the same address. We drove back out, talked to the old lady again, left again. Just as we get back to the station, we get the same call again, same address, and no answer. We go back there again, thinking the old lady has had a little bit of a breakdown. But this time, when we get to the door, the old lady is not there. We ring the doorbell. There was no answer. It turned out the door was unlocked. We looked inside and saw. Grandmother was lying on the floor and not breathing. We immediately administered first aid and took her to the hospital. She was in a stable condition. Waking up in the ambulance, she still kept saying that she hadn't called us and that we had arrived almost immediately after she passed out. From the station to her house was 15 minutes ride. Before taking her to the hospital, she asked me and another emergency worker, could we bring her knitting needles and some clothes to the hospital? I said I would pick up her stuff because I had a friend who lived in that area that I was going to meet anyway. Well, I pick up my friend and we drove to Grandma's house. I run into the house to get the bag with clothes and spokes. In the meantime, my buddy stayed sitting in the car. And just as I was leaving the house, I swear I felt someone's hand on my back and heard a voice saying, "Thank you." When I got back in the car, my friend asked, why this grandmother's husband couldn't take her stuff to the hospital himself. I said that her husband was dead, to which the friend replied, then who was that old man in the window who smiled and waved at me? I refused to believe in anything supernatural at first, so I called the police and had them look at the house. I thought someone had broken into her. They didn't find anything unusual and there was no one inside. Later, a friend and I went over to the grandmother together. He started describing the old man who was standing in the window, but the old lady, without letting him continue, immediately began to sob and said, "This is my Harold." I'm literally in tears right now through the fear. It's easy to deny ghost stories until some such thing personally happens to you. I'm an emergency worker. One day we were called to a local mall. We arrived and it turned out that an 8-year-old girl was having trouble breathing. It was late at night and her mother, aunt, and cousin had just been caught stealing. We assumed the breathing problems were caused by stress. As soon as we got in the car, the girl looked my partner and me in the eye and said the place she lived was bad. She said she lives surrounded by demons. I swear with my ass. As soon as she said about demons in seconds, her heart rate dropped from 90 to 45 beats per minute. My partner and I looked at each other and immediately started trying to defuse the situation. Eventually, the girl came to her senses. I'll never forget that incident. As soon as we stabilized her condition, of course, we immediately reported everything to the police. Not my story, but when I read it, I was quite shocked. An old lady called 911 and asked for some cops to be sent to her house because she saw a strange figure lurking in her backyard. She lived alone and felt in danger that night when she saw someone's silhouette in the window. When the police arrived, the door was unlocked, they entered the house, saw the grandmother sitting facing the window, and went to check the backyard. There were no signs of breaking and entering and nothing was missing. And there was a high fence around the house, making it almost impossible for anyone to break in. Nevertheless, cops found footprints inside the house. It is likely that she left the door unlocked and saw someone not outside through the window, but in reflection inside the house behind her. I was in Afghanistan, standing at my post. Suddenly, I turned toward the farmer's field and saw a huge panther there. The thing looked like it was about 10 meters long. My heart started pounding like crazy. I was about to tell my guys on the radio when suddenly I realized that I had to turn off the depth perception on my night vision goggles. After that, I immediately saw a regular cat of about 40 centimeters or so, which was sitting on the ledge of the guardhouse. Best day of the cat's life. I scared the shit out of a Marine once. Yeah, guys, that was a cool day, and apparently the most hilarious moment of my life. Well, except maybe when I threw the hairball into his coffee mug or when I threw the grenades off the table. Yeah, that was fun too. I'm a medic, firefighter. One late summer night, we were going on a call in the countryside. My partner and I were driving down a winding 2-lane highway in the middle of nowhere. No lighting except for the headlights and the moon. We come to a steep right turn, as suddenly I see a man moving in the tall grass. He moves very quickly and smoothly, as if riding standing on a bicycle. His arms and torso are not bouncing or moving up and down like when running. Anyway, I was a little confused to see the man in the middle of the night cutting through the grass on his bike, but still. Then he approaches a tree and stops. At about this point, we pass him. I look out the window and I see him standing next to the tree. No bike or anything. He's just standing there watching the truck go by. My hair stands on end. We keep driving and I decide to ask my partner if he had seen the guy. His answer? Bro, and I thought it was me who went crazy. This incident is very hard to explain. And yes, maybe it was just a coincidence, but to this day I never tell my coworkers about it. I worked as a homicide investigator for a while. We dealt with all the alleged suicides, investigated them to make sure for sure it wasn't murder. Usually we would determine the motive for the suicide and find a note or other indication that the person was suicidal. For example, one guy stupidly taped a note to his chest that said, "Well, bitch, now you happy?" and made sure his wife was the first one to find him after he hanged himself. But sometimes there are cases where all the evidence points to the fact that a person committed suicide. But there is no note indistinguishable reason why this person might have committed suicide. Such people have good health, decent jobs, and at first glance, a happy family life. But who knows what people really have going on? Now let me tell you about that one case that still gives me the creeps. There have been about 10 suicides in my career in which the motive was not obvious. In the last 3 of those cases, I found the same thing at the crime scene. It was a small, decorative, woven lighthouse that was found in all the places. It was the same lighthouse with the same design. It was painted white and blue. The first time it popped into my head because I was standing by the bed where the body was lying. But 2 weeks later, I saw the same fucking lighthouse on another suicide and even told a patrol officer about the coincidence. A few months later, I went to investigate another suicide and saw the same woven lighthouse. It clicked in my mind then that these were always unexplained suicides. I went back to the station and started looking through all the photos from the scenes of every suicide I worked on. In 2 of them, I saw in the photo what could be this woven lighthouse, but the angle of the photo was unfortunate and there was too much miscellaneous junk around to be sure. Whatever, guys. I thought it was creepy as hell, but after a couple of months, I transferred and stopped thinking about it. Modified. You're asking if it possibly was a serial killer? You know, I highly doubt it. These were all obvious suicides, most of which had no adequate alternative explanation. We always worked on every suicide as if it were a murder. Supposedly a suicide almost always is a suicide, but we always refute it anyway. Also, even though there are actually more serial killers than you think, they rarely leave calling cards or anything like that usually shown in movies. Usually it's some kind of a psycho with a particular style. I really think it was just a weird coincidence, but it was fucking creepy anyway. Buddy, at this rate, you're going to wake up one night and see this decorative woven lighthouse on your bedside table. I would have killed myself right away. You better find that fucking lighthouse and burn it the fuck down. It never occurred to me that it was the same lighthouse. I thought it was some kind of seasonal ornament that was sold at the pottery shop. One day we got a call that some dude was driving without a helmet on a motorcycle at breakneck speed and had run into a car. We got there right away, even though it was a Saturday afternoon. And it happened in the middle of the suburbs. No one even came up to check on the poor guy. Seriously, the streets were completely deserted. Usually on such occasions, a crowd of onlookers would gather around, but not this time. In general, the victim's skull was badly fractured. He himself showed no signs of life. I had never seen a more serious head injury in my life. Our preliminary assessment of his condition was that he had a severe skull fracture, a concussion, plus massive bleeding. He was also missing some teeth and numerous abrasions from falling on the pavement. But fortunately, he was peeled off, not all of his skin. To give you a rough idea, it looked so bad that most people wouldn't have survived something like that. And if anyone had survived, they would have been a vegetable for the rest of their lives. In a normal situation, we would have dragged him off the road and onto the sidewalk. But when a person has a head or neck injury, dragging them is extremely dangerous. My partner, who was more experienced and trained me, since I was still kind of new, went to check his pulse while I started pulling out our equipment. He sat down, held his finger on the pulse for a while, and then stood up and just wanted to say something. All of a sudden, the fucking guy jumped up. He didn't even put his hands up to get up. He just fucking jumped up on his feet. Me and my partner got scared shitless. The guy looked at us, smiled, and tried to lift the bike. We tried to stop him, but given his condition, we didn't want to jostle with him. He took off from us and stupidly skipped off into the woods, leaving his bike behind. My partner freaked out even more than I did. He stood there with his mouth open, watching where the guy was going. Then he turned to me and mumbled, "Dude, he had no fucking pulse." I asked him if he was sure, and he swore by everything he had that the biker was clinically dead. We went to the authorities for help, and they sent a search and rescue team into the woods. I don't know if they found him or not because we usually don't get any information about patients after they get to the doctors. My best version of what happened, a dude with a clouded mind decided to head for his lover's house. From head injuries, people tend to bleed a wild amount of blood, so I'm guessing the guy left a long red blood trail that the cops were able to track him down. Thanks so much for watching. Cops and other law enforcement officers, in the comments below the video, tell us about cases where you thought something supernatural paranormal was going on. And don't forget to check out our other episodes. Bye.